My son-in-law called me one evening with a request that seemed simple enough. He was supposedly out of town and said, "Frank, can you check on Daisy for me? Just make sure she gets her food." At first, it sounded harmless, but my stomach twisted. My daughter Lily adored that golden retriever. She would never let the animal go hungry, no matter how she felt. Something in his voice told me this was not about a dog. I agreed, but inside I already knew something was very wrong. Before we continue, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you discovered your daughter's husband was hiding something this dark behind closed doors? The phone call ended, and I stared at the receiver like it had just burned my hand. Ethan Brooks was slick with his words, always playing the role of a friendly son-in-law. But beneath that charm, I never trusted him. He married Lily 3 years ago, and from the start, I saw things most fathers notice instantly. The restless eyes, the way he cataloged every item in my house as if measuring their worth, the way he wrapped Lily's hand a little too tightly when introducing her. Yet Lily had smiled then, and I swallowed my doubts. Now, as the empty silence of my living room settled back around me, I felt those doubts return like a storm cloud I should have seen coming sooner. The January cold outside pressed against the windows of my small Ohio home. For 30 years, I had lived there, raising Lily after her mother passed. My life had become routine. Coffee in the same chipped mug, the same worn recliner, the same quiet evenings. But something in Ethan's story scratched at me. He said he was on a business trip. Ethan never traveled for work. He sold furniture. He also said Lily had been under the weather, sleeping too much, catching a bug. Yet she had not called me in weeks, breaking a tradition that went back to when she was a teenager. Every Sunday she called, even if she had nothing to say, even if it was only for 5 minutes. If she had been too sick, she would have found a way. Unless Ethan was making sure she could not. I pulled on my coat and reached for the truck keys. The roads outside were slick with ice, the town quiet except for the occasional plow scraping across asphalt. As I drove toward Lily's neighborhood, I could not shake the image of her voice from the last time we spoke. She had been subdued, saying Ethan was busy and she was just tired. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think she was adjusting to marriage, to life with him. Now those words felt like a warning I had ignored. When I pulled into the subdivision, the houses all looked the same, lined up like copy and paste boxes on what used to be farmland. Ethan had insisted they buy there, calling it an investment. I thought it looked sterile and false, without character. Their white house with black shutters stood silent, its driveway bare, no car, no footprints in the snow leading to the door. Even the mailbox had a thin layer of ice, as if no one had touched it in weeks. My pulse quickened. I knocked on the door, calling softly. "Lily, it's Dad." No answer. My hand went to the keys on my ring, searching for the spare Lily had given me years back, just in case. When the lock clicked and I stepped inside, I knew at once that something was deeply wrong. The air was heavy and still, the kind of silence that is not peace, but absence. The living room held the shape of a family, but without life. Dust on the table, cold dishes stacked in the sink, a plate with dried food left forgotten on the counter. Then I heard it. A sound so soft I almost missed it. Whimpering. I followed it down the hall, my boots careful against the wooden floor. Daisy was there, sitting beside a door at the very end. Her golden fur looked dull, her ribs too visible beneath her skin. She wagged her tail weakly when she saw me, but did not move from the spot. Her empty bowl sat pushed against the wall. She had been waiting, not for food, but for someone to open that door. I crouched beside her, scratching behind her ears. "What is it, girl? What are you trying to tell me?" Her eyes met mine, desperate, pleading. The door in front of us had a new deadbolt. I froze, bile rising in my throat. A lock on the outside of a bedroom door. My voice trembled as I knocked. "Lily? Honey, are you in there?" Silence. Daisy whined again, scratching at the wood with her paw. My chest tightened. I stepped back and braced my leg. The first kick rattled the frame but did not give. The second splintered the wood. With a third, the door burst inward. The smell struck me like a hammer. Rot, waste, sickness, despair. I covered my nose with my sleeve, eyes watering. The stench poured out, and in the dim light, I saw something on the mattress that barely looked human anymore. The stench poured out, and in the dim light, I saw something on the mattress that barely looked human anymore. For a moment, my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. The figure was so thin, so fragile. I thought it might be a stranger. Then I caught the shape of her jaw, the same as her mother's, the curve of her cheekbones, even under the bruises. My knees almost buckled. It was Lily, my daughter, my only child. I stumbled forward, the reek of filth wrapping around me like a blanket I could not escape. The curtains had been drawn tight, shutting out the world, and the only light came from the hallway behind me. On the floor near the mattress sat a bucket, half filled with dark liquid that made my stomach turn. Food trays, crusted with mold and dried scraps, were stacked in a corner like forgotten trash. But none of that hit me harder than the sight of Lily. She lay on her side, curled in on herself like a child. Her hair, once golden and full of life, was matted against her head, greasy and tangled. Her arms were bruised, not in one place but everywhere, purple and yellow stains marking old injuries. Her nightgown was stained, her ribs sticking out so sharply I thought they might tear through the fabric. I knelt down beside her, my voice cracking. "Lily, baby, it's Dad. Can you hear me?" Her chest rose and fell shallowly, breaths so thin I could hardly see them. When I touched her shoulder, the bones felt too close to the skin. No muscle left, no strength. She made a sound then, a faint whimper. Not even a word. More like the echo of a word. Her lips parted, but no real voice came out. I swallowed hard, fighting back the burn of tears. "I have you now. You're safe." My arms slid under her body, and I lifted her against me. She weighed almost nothing. The memory struck me instantly. Holding her as a baby in this same position, her head against my chest, back when she was small enough to fit in one arm. Back then, I had promised her mother I would protect her no matter what. Now, as her head lolled against my chest, I felt like I had broken that promise. Daisy followed close, whimpering as I carried Lily out into the hallway, past the photos on the wall. Pictures of a smiling couple. Ethan with his slick grin, Lily with a softer smile that looked forced now that I thought of it. How had I missed the truth hiding in those eyes? I pushed the thought down. There was no time. The winter air slapped me in the face as I pushed through the front door. I carried her to my truck, the snow crunching under my boots, my breath steaming in the cold night. I laid her across the front seat, her head in my lap, covering her with my coat. "Hold on, Lily. Just hold on for me." I whispered it like a prayer, though I had not prayed in years. The drive to the hospital blurred into one long stretch of fear. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every slow car in front of me a personal insult. I kept looking down at her, watching the faint rise and fall of her chest, terrified it would stop before I got there. I kept talking to her, words tumbling out, desperate to keep her tethered to the world. Remember when we went fishing at the lake, Lily? You caught that catfish and screamed so loud I nearly dropped the rod. Remember your high school graduation? You walked across that stage, and your mother would have been so proud. Just keep breathing, baby. Keep breathing. When I roared into the emergency entrance, I did not even park properly. I threw open the door and carried her inside. Help! My voice cut through the sterile white room, and instantly nurses swarmed us. They took her from my arms and placed her on a gurney, wheeling her down a hallway. What happened? One nurse demanded. I found her like this, I said, my throat tight. Locked in a room. No food, no water. Please just save her. The nurses exchanged looks that made my blood run colder. They had seen this before. One of them shouted orders, IV fluids, oxygen, blood tests. I tried to follow, but a doctor stepped in my path. Sir, we need to work. Are you family? I am her father, I said, my voice shaking. Frank Dawson, she's all I have. The doctor nodded firmly. Then you wait here. We will do everything we can. The waiting room became a prison. I paced the tiles, sat, stood, then paced again. Every second dragged like a chain behind me. My mind replayed the sight of her in that room, her bruises, the way her body had shrunk. Rage boiled in my chest, hot and unrelenting. But beneath it was something worse. Guilt. For months I had let Ethan intercept her calls, explain her absence, smooth over every question. I had told myself not to pry, that she was a grown woman, married now. How many times had I almost driven out to see her, but stopped myself? Every one of those times now felt like a knife to the gut. After 3 hours, a doctor finally came. A woman in her 40s with tired eyes, her name badge reading Dr. Kemp. She sat across from me, folding her hands. Mr. Dawson, your daughter is stable for now, but she is in serious condition. My mouth went dry. How serious? Her eyes softened, but her words were steady. She is severely malnourished, dangerously dehydrated, and she has several untreated infections. We found fractures that healed improperly, meaning she has suffered repeated injuries over a long period. This did not happen overnight. Based on our assessment, she has been in this condition for months. The word months hit me like a punch. My fists clenched against my knees. Months. While I went about my quiet life, while Ethan smiled and shook my hand at family dinners, while I told myself not to interfere in their marriage. My daughter had been starving in a locked room. I forced my voice to stay calm. Can I see her? Dr. Kemp nodded. She is weak, in and out of consciousness, but yes. Keep it brief. She led me down a hallway that smelled of disinfectant and something sharper, something that always lingered in hospitals. The room they brought me to had blinds drawn against the night. Machines beeped steadily beside the bed. 4 tubes snaked into Lily's thin arms, a small oxygen tube resting beneath her nose. She looked so small in that bed, almost childlike again, her face pale, her lips cracked. My chest ached at the sight. I pulled a chair to her side and took her hand. It felt fragile, paper thin, but she squeezed faintly. After an hour of silence, her eyes fluttered open. They were dull, glassy, but when they focused, they found me. Her lips moved, her voice hoarse like sand scraping against wood. Dad, I leaned forward quickly. I am here, baby. I am right here. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. He would not let me eat. My breath caught. Who, Lily? Her eyes flickered in fear. Ethan. He said I was worthless, a burden. He locked me in there. I bit down so hard on the inside of my cheek, I tasted blood. Every instinct screamed to shout. to storm from that room and find Ethan right then. But I forced my voice calm. You are safe now. He cannot touch you anymore. She shook her head weakly. Is he coming back? He said he would be angry if I told anyone. Her voice cracked, and the sound carved into me deeper than any blade. I brushed her hair back gently. Listen to me. You are safe. I will never let him hurt you again. That is a promise. She searched my face, as if weighing whether she could believe me. When she finally closed her eyes, drifting back into sleep, I knew she had seen what she needed. The steel in my gaze, the promise I intended to keep, no matter what. I sat there long after she fell asleep, my hand wrapped around hers. The machines beeped steadily, her breath shallow but steady. My mind, however, was anything but steady. It raced with images of her suffering alone for weeks, maybe longer, while Ethan spun his lies. I thought about how he smiled at me when they first met, how I ignored my instincts to keep her happy. I thought about how easily he had called me tonight, asking me to feed the dog, never imagining I would find her. When I closed my eyes, I saw her bruises. I smelled that room. I heard her whisper again. He would not let me eat. My fists clenched tighter. Ethan Brooks had done this deliberately. He had stripped away her strength, her dignity, her will. He had taken my daughter and ground her down until she was almost gone. 6 months. And all I could see was my daughter disappearing before my eyes that whole time, while I did nothing. The words echoed inside me as I sat in that dim hospital room, watching Lily's chest rise and fall beneath a thin blanket. I tried to quiet my thoughts, but rage and guilt gnawed at me in equal measure. Every second I sat here, I thought of Ethan. Where was he right now? Laughing with a beer in hand, sleeping soundly in a bed while his wife lay broken in this sterile place? My teeth ground together until my jaw ached. When morning came, I left Lily's side reluctantly, promising the nurses I would be back. Outside, the world looked dull, gray sky pressing down over Ohio. I drove through her neighborhood slowly, my eyes scanning each house. The subdivision was too quiet, most folks at work. I spotted an older woman shuffling to her mailbox bundled in a heavy coat. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp. I stopped and rolled down my window. "Excuse me, ma'am," I called. "I am Frank Dawson. My daughter lives in that white house on the corner." The suspicion in her eyes softened at once. "Lily's father? Oh, honey. We wondered what happened. Is she all right?" I clenched the steering wheel. "She's in the hospital. Can you tell me, when was the last time you saw her?" The woman shook her head sadly. "Months ago. Used to see her waving when I walked my dog. Always polite, always smiling. Then one day she just vanished. Her husband said she was sick, some condition that made her weak, could not handle visitors. I thought, it's strange. But he was always out in the yard making excuses, saying she needed rest." She hesitated, then added, "Sometimes I heard shouting. Mostly his voice. Once I heard glass breaking. I almost called the police. But the next day he told me it was an accident, a lamp. He smiled the whole time like nothing was wrong." I thanked her and drove away, my chest heavy with dread. Each piece fit too neatly with what Lily had whispered. Ethan had been weaving his story not just for her, but for everyone around them. He wanted to erase her presence, make her disappear quietly, while the neighbors shrugged and thought she was simply unwell. On the way back to the hospital, my mind replayed last Christmas. We had gathered at my house, the three of us at the table. Lily had seemed tired, distracted, eating little. Ethan did most of the talking, cracking jokes about how she was watching her figure and always dozing off. I remembered laughing politely, brushing it off. Now the memory turned sour. She had been fading even then, right in front of me, and I had let Ethan's slick words cover the truth. When I returned to the hospital, I walked into Lily's room to find her asleep. I settled into the chair beside her when the sound of footsteps made me look up. My gut tightened instantly. Ethan Brooks stepped through the doorway, a bouquet of flowers in hand, his face painted with perfect concern. His dark hair was combed neatly, his clothes pressed, as though he had dressed carefully for this performance. "Frank," he said warmly, as if nothing were wrong. "How is she?" I said nothing at first, my eyes fixed on him like a hawk. He walked quickly to Lily's bedside, setting the flowers on the table. He reached for her hand, and though Lily's eyes fluttered open briefly, I saw her body stiffen. Her lips pressed tight, her gaze darting toward me. I understood. She was afraid. Ethan bent low, whispering as though speaking tenderly to her. "Sweetheart, I am so sorry. I should have been here. I had no idea it was this bad." Then, turning to me, he sighed heavily. "Thank you, Frank. Really. Thank you for finding her. I cannot imagine what might have happened if you had not gone over there." His eyes glistened with practiced emotion. I leaned back in the chair, forcing my face neutral. "Doctor says she was malnourished. Locked in a room." Ethan's expression flickered only for a second before smoothing into sorrow. She has been so withdrawn. I thought it was depression. I tried to help. I thought if I gave her space, she would get better. She insisted she just needed rest. I never thought. He let his voice trail off, shaking his head like a man carrying unbearable guilt. I wanted to leap from my chair and break his mask apart with my fists, but I stayed still. Let him play. Let him dig his own grave with lies. The nurses, of course, bought it immediately. I heard one whisper to another in the hall. "Poor man, he looks so worried. Such a devoted husband." Devoted. The word burned in my ears. If only they had seen the bruises, the lock on the door, the way Lily flinched when his hand touched hers. For the next few minutes, Ethan sat close to Lily, asking about her treatment, nodding as the doctor explained fluid therapy and nutritional plans. He even dabbed at his eyes when the doctor mentioned how close she had been to organ failure. Every word was a performance. Every gesture designed to convince the world he was blameless. But I watched more closely. I saw the way his thumb pressed against the inside of her wrist, right where a bruise darkened her skin. It looked like a comforting gesture to anyone else, but I noticed how her hand trembled beneath his touch. His eyes flicked to mine then, holding just a second too long, as though daring me to speak. Later, as he stood to leave, he leaned down close to her ear. I shifted slightly, pretending to adjust my chair, and caught his words. His voice dropped low, smooth and cold. "If you embarrass me here," he whispered, "you will regret it when you come home." My blood turned to fire. Every muscle in my body tightened. But I forced myself to stay still. If I lunged now, I would ruin everything. Instead, I etched his words into my memory, burning them there like a brand. Lily's eyes flickered to mine again, wide with terror, pleading. She had heard him too many times before. As Ethan left the room, he gave me that easy smile, the one he had used from the very beginning. "I will be back tomorrow," he said casually, like a husband leaving his wife in recovery after surgery. His footsteps echoed down the hall until they disappeared. I sat back down beside Lily, my chest heaving with silent fury. My daughter had nearly died under his roof. And now he dared to walk into this place, flowers in hand, pretending to be her savior. The world saw him as devoted, but I saw the truth. Behind the mask was a monster. I took Lily's hand gently, careful not to touch the bruises. She whispered weakly, "Did you hear him?" I nodded, my jaw tight. "Yes, and I promise you, Lily, he will never hurt you again." That night, as I drove home through the frozen streets, the image of Ethan's face replayed in my mind, smooth, polished, full of lies. I knew then that this was not just about saving Lily. This was about justice. Real justice, the kind no courtroom could deliver. And it started with listening, watching, and waiting. "If you embarrass me here," I heard him murmur, "you will regret it when you come home." Those words became my compass over the next several days. I understood that charging blindly at Ethan would do nothing but risk Lily's safety. He had already built a performance that fooled neighbors, nurses, and even the doctors. To the world, he looked like a concerned husband who had been caught off guard by his wife's sudden illness. If I wanted to expose the truth, or deliver the kind of justice the courts never seemed to manage, I needed to be patient. I needed to gather what I could in silence until the right moment arrived. I spent every morning at the hospital, watching over Lily. She was slowly gaining strength with IV fluids and small portions of food carefully monitored by the staff. The doctors explained that her body could not handle a sudden flood of nutrition after so long in deprivation. It would have to be gradual. She drifted in and out of sleep most of the time, sometimes muttering in dreams, sometimes jerking awake with fear in her eyes, until she saw me and settled back into a fragile calm. When she was awake, she spoke in fragments. Bits and pieces of what she had endured came out between shallow breaths. He made me weigh myself every morning. He said books were pointless and threw mine away. He would lock the door, sometimes all day. Each sentence was a knife twisting deeper. The more she revealed, the more I realized Ethan had not just starved her body. He had starved her mind and spirit. He had taken away the small joys that made her Lily, stripping her down until she was a shadow. Every afternoon, I drove past their neighborhood, sometimes parking down the street to see if anything stirred around that White House. It stood as still and lifeless as the night I had broken through the bedroom door. A house should tell the story of those who live inside. Lights in the windows, curtains drawn back, signs of life. That house told only one story now: captivity. One evening, I drove past and saw the old woman with the mailbox again. She waved, concern in her eyes. I got out of the truck to speak with her. "How long?" I asked quietly. "Do you think she was kept from you all?" "How long since anyone in the neighborhood saw her?" The woman frowned. 6 months at least, maybe more. People asked sometimes, but he always had an answer. Flu, exhaustion, something vague. I wanted to believe him. We all did. Her voice cracked. I should have knocked on the door. I put a hand on her arm. "This is not your fault. Monsters hide best in plain sight." He counted on people wanting to believe the easy explanation. At night, I returned to the hospital. That was when Ethan came. He always arrived neatly dressed, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with a new blanket or a stuffed animal, as if Lily were a child in need of comforting trinkets. The nurses lit up when they saw him, whispering about what a caring man he was. Some even compared him to other husbands who never showed up. They had no idea. I watched everything. The way he would brush Lily's hair from her face with exaggerated tenderness while leaning down to mutter threats only she and I could hear. The way he positioned himself between her and me, controlling the room as though he were the gatekeeper of her recovery. His voice would drop, too quiet for others, but never for me. Do not tell them everything. Remember what happens if you embarrass me. They will not believe you anyway. Lily would nod faintly, eyes downcast, too weak to argue. I wanted to roar at him, to drag him out by the throat. But instead, I listened, watching, waiting, just as I promised myself. Then came the moment when his mask slipped further than he intended. It was a Tuesday evening. Lily was awake, pale but alert, eating a small bowl of broth under the careful watch of a nurse. Ethan arrived with a smile so wide it looked carved onto his face. "How is my girl?" he asked, kissing her forehead. She froze under his touch, but the nurse smiled warmly, fooled again. "She is improving little by little," the nurse said. "Strong woman you have here." Ethan laughed softly, squeezing Lily's hand. "She has always been strong." The nurse left soon after, and the room fell quiet except for the steady beep of the monitor. Ethan leaned closer, pressing his thumb against the inside of Lily's wrist. To anyone else, it looked like a comforting touch. But I saw the slight wince, the tremor in her hand, the shadow of pain in her eyes. His thumb pressed harder on the bruise that marked her skin. "See?" he murmured, his lips curling slightly where the nurse could not see. "You are still mine. Do not forget it." I clenched my fists under the table, every muscle straining to stay in my chair. This was not comfort. This was control, a message only she and I could decipher. The mask of the caring husband was slipping, and underneath was the predator I had known from the start. That night, I drove home with the image seared into my mind, his thumb pressing into her wound while the world believed he was soothing her. And I knew then, with absolute certainty, that waiting could not last forever. The drive back through the frozen streets of Ohio was a blur, headlights smearing across the windshield like streaks of cold light. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My chest burned with anger, but beneath it was something even sharper. Clarity. For weeks I had been listening, watching and waiting, convincing myself that patience would reveal the truth in a way the world could not deny. But that moment in the hospital, when Ethan pressed down on her bruise as though it were a button only he had the right to control, shattered the illusion. He was not afraid of discovery. He was daring me. And if I kept waiting, if I let the law run its sluggish course, then he would keep playing his role until Lily was back under his roof. And then he would finish what he had started. I sat in my dark kitchen long past midnight, the house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I stared at the table where my wife and I had once shared meals, where Lily had done her homework as a girl, where she used to laugh about things that now seemed impossibly far away. For years I believed that being a father meant stepping back when your child grew up, letting them make their choices even when you saw flaws in those choices. I thought respecting her independence meant biting my tongue about Ethan, smiling when I wanted to warn her, keeping the peace instead of raising alarm. Now that silence felt like a betrayal. I had failed to protect her when she needed me most, and the only way to make it right was to ensure he never laid a hand on her again. The thought of calling the police crossed my mind, but it flickered and died quickly. I had been around long enough to know how cases like this unfolded. Ethan would hire a lawyer, paint himself as a husband struggling with a mentally unstable wife. He would say she refused food, harmed herself, exaggerated his discipline. He would cry in front of the judge, offer carefully staged texts or emails to suggest concern. Maybe he would get a short sentence, maybe probation if the lawyer was slick enough. And then he would come back, smiling, weaving his lies, and Lily would never truly escape him. The system was built for people who followed rules. Ethan had abandoned rules long ago when he locked a door on his wife and turned the key. I thought about the men I had known in construction, tough men with rough hands and harder lives. I had seen what happened to wives who tried to leave men like Ethan. Some escaped and rebuilt. Others never got the chance. The thought of Lily being one of those women, reduced to a name in a police report, made my chest tighten until I could hardly breathe. No, I told myself. I could not let her become another tragedy no one remembered after the headlines faded. The lake came to mind then, the place where I had taught Lily to fish as a little girl. The water was frozen now, the woods around it bare and silent. That place had always felt like ours, untouched by the noise of the world. I knew every trail, every hollow, every tree bent in a way that gave shelter. If I needed a place to do what had to be done, I already had one. The thought settled in me with a strange calmness. Not relief, not anticipation, just the quiet certainty of a man who had been given only one path forward. Over the next few days, I observed Ethan carefully, weaving my routine around his. I spent mornings at the hospital with Lily, afternoons driving through his neighborhood, evenings back by Lily's side. I memorized his patterns. He came home from the hospital visits around 9, walked Daisy before bed around 11, drank beer on the porch when the nights were clear. His life followed a rhythm that made him predictable. Predictability meant opportunity. One afternoon, I called the furniture store where he worked. A woman answered and told me he was on extended leave. My hand tightened around the phone. Extended leave. That meant he had all the time in the world to hover around Lily, to weave his stories, to rebuild the walls of control once she was discharged. Number that would not happen. At the hospital, I noticed small changes in Lily. Color was returning to her, cheeks. She could sit up for short periods, eat a little more each day. But every time Ethan arrived, her eyes dimmed, her shoulders curled inward. It was as if his presence reached inside her and pulled her back toward that locked room. She was terrified of him, even in the safety of a hospital bed surrounded by staff. That fear told me all I needed to know. If she still trembled under his gaze here, what chance would she have once she was home again? I began to plan with precision. My tools were simple. My knowledge of him was detailed. I would not use a gun. Too loud, too quick to draw attention. A knife was possible, but messy. No, the simplest method was the one I had carried in my body my whole life. My hands. Hands that had built houses, lifted beams, repaired roofs. Hands that had raised a daughter and buried a wife. They would now carry out the one task left to me, protecting what was mine. On Friday morning, my phone rang. It was Ethan. His voice was casual, friendly, like nothing in the world was wrong. "Frank, just wanted to let you know I am heading back today. Thanks again for looking after Daisy. Could not have done it without you." I forced my voice steady. "No problem. She's a good dog." He chuckled. "Yeah, she is. Listen, I thought I would swing by the hospital tonight, surprise Lily. Which room is she in?" My stomach nodded, but my voice came out smooth. I gave him the room number. Let him come. Let him perform his devotion one last time. Let him show the world his mask before I tore it away forever. That evening, I sat by Lily's bedside, pretending to read a newspaper while she picked at her carefully portioned meal. Her voice was quiet. "Dad, my stomach feels strange." I smiled softly. "It is normal. Your body is remembering how to eat. It will feel odd for a while." She frowned. Will it always feel this way? I shook my head. Number U will heal. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her freeze. I recognized the rhythm instantly. Quick, confident, the stride of a man who believed he owned every space he entered. He is here, she whispered, her voice trembling. I reached across the bed, placing my hand over hers. I know. The door opened, and Ethan entered, dressed in a dark suit, freshly shaved, flowers in hand. His face radiated concern. His eyes shone with false devotion. If I had not seen the truth, I might have believed he was a husband rushing to the side of his ill wife. He leaned down, brushing his lips against her forehead. Lily, honey, I came as soon as I could. She lay still, eyes closed, enduring his touch as though it were poison. He placed the flowers beside the bed, then looked at me. Frank, thank you. Really, you saved her life. I do not know what would have happened if you had not gone to the house. I studied his face under the fluorescent light. There was no guilt there, no fear, only the satisfaction of a man confident in his performance. When visiting hours ended, he walked with me toward the parking lot. The air outside was sharp, our breath visible in the cold. He glanced at me casually. I cannot thank you enough for everything. Finding her like that, it must have been awful. I said nothing. He pressed on. I should have been there more. I should have noticed. But work has been crazy, money tight. She stopped eating, started sleeping more. I thought it was stress. I thought she was just depressed. I had no idea it was this bad. His lies slid off his tongue like oil, smooth and practiced. I listened, every word etching deeper into my resolve. He thought he was safe. He thought he could continue to manipulate the story, bend it to his advantage. But he was wrong. That night, I sat in my truck by the lake, staring at the frozen water. The moon hung low, its reflection fractured on the ice. I thought of Lily as a girl, her laughter carrying across this same lake, her small hands clutching a fishing rod, her eyes bright with wonder. That little girl had grown into a woman who had been broken by a man who smiled while he did it. My jaw tightened. I whispered into the silence, not anymore. I had made my decision. Ethan Brooks would not live to put her in that room again. That thought carried me like a current through the following days. The anger that once burned uncontrollably had cooled into something sharper, like steel hardened in fire. I went through each moment with care, rehearsing what needed to be done, leaving nothing to chance. Every detail mattered. The smallest mistake could unravel everything, and I would not allow that. For Lily's sake, this had to be done right. At the hospital, Ethan continued to put on his show. He arrived daily, always with some token in hand, flowers, magazines, little gifts that looked sweet to those who did not know better. The nurses whispered about how dedicated he was, how lucky Lily must feel to have such a husband. They could not see the way her body tensed when he walked in, how her eyes shifted to me in silent desperation whenever he touched her. I sat nearby each time, forcing myself to remain calm while memorizing every flicker of his mask. His lies dripped so easily, but I had trained myself to hear the truth hidden underneath. The hospital staff believed him. The neighbors had believed him. Even Lily, broken by months of his abuse, had started to believe his poison. But I knew better. I had seen the locked door, the empty bowls, the bruises. I had carried her frail body out of that prison. My eyes had seen what his lies tried to cover. And soon, his words would mean nothing. By Thursday night, I was ready. I had spent evenings parked down the street from his house, watching his movements, memorizing his schedule. He was a man of habit. 9 o'clock return from the hospital, 11 o'clock dog walk, beer in hand as he sat on the porch. The house grew quiet after midnight, neighbors asleep, streets empty. His confidence made him careless. He believed no one was watching. He believed no one could touch him. That arrogance would be his undoing. Friday came cold and clear. At the hospital that morning, Lily was stronger, her voice more certain. She looked at me with something like hope for the first time. "Dad," she whispered, "what happens when I leave here? What if he comes back for me?" I brushed her hair gently. "You will be safe, Lily. I promise." She studied my face, searching for something unspoken. Slowly, she nodded, as if she understood there was more behind my words. That evening, I waited in my truck at the end of Ethan's street, engine off, wrapped in silence. The neighborhood was dark, most windows already dim. At 9:30, his car pulled into the driveway, just as I expected. Lights flicked on inside the house, the kitchen, then the living room. I waited. At 11, the front door opened. Ethan stepped out with Daisy on a leash, a beer in his hand, his stride easy, casual. He walked the same path he always walked, around the block and back. 15 minutes later, he returned, letting Daisy into the yard while he finished his drink on the porch. At 11:40, the house went dark except for the porch light. I gave it another hour, sitting in silence, listening to the ticking of my watch. Then I slipped from the truck and moved across the yard. Daisy spotted me in the shadows, her tail wagging faintly. She remembered me, remembered the night I had saved her from hunger. "Good girl," I whispered, scratching behind her ears. She pressed against my leg, silent, obedient. She would not betray me. The back door was unlocked, just as I had hoped. Small towns bred lazy habits, and Ethan's arrogance had made him careless. I stepped inside, closing the door softly behind me. The kitchen smelled of old beer and stale food. Plates were piled in the sink, a pizza box left on the counter. I moved through the room silently, my boots finding the soft spots in the floor where no sound carried. I passed the door where Lily had been kept prisoner. It was shut now, as though he had tried to erase its memory. But I knew. The walls still carried her suffering. My jaw tightened as I walked past. Light spilled under the master bedroom door. A television played softly inside. I turned the handle slowly. It moved without resistance. The door creaked as it opened, and I stepped into the room. Ethan lay propped against pillows, beer bottle on the nightstand, remote in his hand. His eyes flicked to me, confusion crossing his face for just a second before he masked it. "Frank? What the hell are you doing here? How did you get in?" "Back door," I said evenly. He muted the television, sat up straighter. "Is Lily okay? Did something happen?" Even now, even confronted in his own bedroom, his first instinct was to lie, to play the part of a worried husband. "Lily is recovering," I said. My voice was calm, flat. He exhaled, dramatically. "Good, that is good. I was worried sick. You cannot imagine how hard this has been, watching her fade like that." I stepped further into the room, closing the door behind me. I know exactly how hard it has been. Something in my tone made his eyes narrow. "Look, Frank, I know how this might seem." "How it seems," I cut in, my voice low, "is that you locked my daughter in a room and starved her almost to death." He laughed nervously. "She is sick, Frank. You do not understand. She stops eating when she is depressed. She hurts herself. I had to protect her from herself. By bruising her arms? By locking the door from the outside? By pressing your thumb into her wounds while pretending to comfort her? His face faltered, mask slipping. For a moment, something cold and ugly flashed in his eyes. Then he shrugged, as though the weight of his lies was too heavy to carry anymore. His voice hardened. Fine. You want the truth? Your precious daughter is weak, pathetic. She cries about everything, cannot cook a decent meal, cannot keep a house. I gave her everything, this home, a life, and all she did was complain. So yes, I taught her some respect. Someone had to. The words poured out, venomous, each one stoking the fire inside me. He stood then, emboldened by his own cruelty. You think she did not deserve it? Toward the end, she stopped fighting. She accepted it. She knew she was nothing, a burden. And when she finally broke completely, I would have been free of her. That was the moment. The mask was gone. The monster stood bare before me. I moved before he could react. My hands closed around his throat, slamming him back against the wall. The framed pictures rattled with the force. His eyes bulged, hands clawing at mine, but my grip was iron. You starved her, I growled. You broke her. His mouth opened, choking sounds spilling out, his face turning red. He swung wild punches at my shoulders, but they landed with no power. I thought of Lily whispering that he would not let her eat. I thought of the bruises, the way she shrank when he entered her room at the hospital. I thought of the little girl with the fishing rod at the lake, who used to laugh at every ripple in the water. My grip tightened. He gasped, wheezing. Wait, please, I will leave, I will disappear. No, I said softly, my voice like stone. You will not. His struggles grew frantic, nails raking across my face, drawing lines of blood, but I did not loosen my hold. His eyes rolled back, lips turning blue. I held steady, the strength of 40 years of work running through my arms. Slowly, his body weakened. His hands fell from mine, his movements fading until finally there was nothing. No breath, no pulse, only silence. I released him, and his body slumped to the floor. The television continued playing its muted images, absurd in the stillness of the room. Daisy appeared at the doorway, her eyes wide, tail wagging faintly. I looked at her and whispered, It is over. He cannot hurt anyone now. I worked quickly. In the closet, I found a large duffel bag. I stuffed it with clothes, toiletries, papers, staging it to look like he had packed for a trip. I cleaned the beer bottle he had been drinking, placed it back on the shelf. No sign of a struggle. No trace of me. Then I dragged his body to the garage, wrapped it in a tarp, and heaved it into the bed of my truck. The weight was heavy, awkward, but my determination carried me through. Before leaving, I glanced once more at the bedroom where he had lived so smugly, so certain of his control. Now it was just a room, and he was nothing but silence. I closed the door softly and stepped into the night. I drove slowly, carefully toward the lake. The tarp rustled faintly in the back, but the night was quiet, the road empty. The moon hung above, lighting the frozen woods. By dawn, I would bury him where no one would ever find him. The woods around the lake were silent as I drove down the old logging road, the tires crunching over frozen ground. This place had always been a refuge. I brought Lily here when she was small, teaching her how to bait a hook, how to cast her line into the rippling water. Back then, the woods seemed alive with possibility. Now they stood as silent witnesses to what I was about to do. I parked the truck where the trees grew thickest and dragged the heavy tarp from the bed. My breath steamed in the cold air as I hauled it across the uneven ground. The frozen soil fought me, but years of construction had taught me how to dig even in the hardest conditions. My shovel bit into the earth, breaking through the crust of frost, throwing clumps of dirt aside. Hours passed, my muscles burning, sweat soaking into my clothes despite the chill. When the hole was deep enough, I rolled the body in. I stood for a moment, looking down at the still form wrapped in plastic. There was no triumph in me, no thrill, just grim necessity. I thought of Lily locked in that dark room, her body wasting away while he drank his beer and smiled for the neighbors. That image fueled me as I covered him with earth, stamping the ground flat, scattering leaves and branches until the ground looked untouched. By spring, new growth would cover any sign of what lay beneath. Ethan Brooks was gone, swallowed by the earth in the very place where Lily once laughed freely. I returned to the truck, stripped off the clothes that clung with sweat and dirt, and stuffed them into a garbage bag. I had already planned each step. His duffel bag, carefully packed, waited at his house, suggesting he had left of his own accord. Later that day, I would drive his car to the bus station, leave the keys in it, and walk away. Someone would steal it soon enough. To anyone looking, it would appear that Ethan had abandoned his wife in the hospital and disappeared. People would shake their heads, but no one would be surprised. When I finally reached home, exhaustion hit me. But I forced myself to scrub under my nails, shower away the dirt and sweat, burn the clothes in the barrel out back. No trace remained. By morning, I was seated at the kitchen table, sipping coffee from the same chipped mug, as though nothing in the world had changed. But everything had changed. The first cracks in the story came quickly. Ethan missed a meeting with Lily's doctors that morning. The nurses frowned, confused that the man who had been so attentive suddenly failed to appear. By afternoon, he had not called. By evening, still no sign. I told them I had not heard from him either. Concern spread, then questions, then whispers. When the hospital tried to reach him at home, there was no answer. His job confirmed he was on leave. His friends admitted they had not heard from him in days. His mother, a cold woman who lived 2 towns over, was contacted by the staff. Her response was as telling as anything else. "I am not surprised," she said flatly. "That boy never could stick to anything. Probably ran off with some floozy. I always told Amelia," she stumbled over Lily's name, "that he would leave her eventually." Her voice carried no grief, no shock, only weary contempt. The story wrote itself. A husband, faced with mounting medical bills and a wife in critical condition, decided to cut his losses and vanish. He packed a bag, abandoned his car, and disappeared into the world. To the neighbors, it was scandalous, but not unthinkable. "We always thought he was too smooth," one said when I overheard. "Never seemed real." The police looked briefly, but with no signs of foul play and plenty of witnesses describing a troubled marriage. They closed the case as a voluntary disappearance. Adults, after all, had the right to vanish. Through it all, Lily never once asked where he was. The nurses would mention his absence, their voices tinged with disapproval, but she would only nod. When Dr. Kemp suggested contacting the police to file a missing persons report, Lily shook her head. Number, let him go. Her voice was calm, steady. She did not need answers. She knew in her heart that he would never return. Weeks passed, and Lily's strength slowly returned. She gained weight, her color improving. Physical therapy helped her walk steadily again. The hospital discharged her into my care, and she came home to the house where she had grown up. At first, the silence of her old bedroom seemed strange to her. She woke in the night more than once, her cries piercing through the walls. But Daisy was there, pressing close to her side, her warm body a shield against old fears. Each morning, Lily woke a little stronger, her steps a little surer. Counseling became part of her life. Twice a week, she met with a therapist who helped her untangle the knots Ethan had tied around her mind. Some days, she returned shaken, raw with memories she could barely speak. Other days, she returned lighter, as though one chain had been broken. Slowly, the shadows in her eyes began to lift. She found comfort in small things. The garden behind the house, once her mother's pride, became her project. At first, she only sat in the soil, her hands brushing across the dirt as though testing if it still belonged to her. Then she began to plant. Bright flowers, tomatoes, beans. She tended them carefully, coaxing life from the ground. In the evenings, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching her kneel among the blossoms as Daisy circled nearby. Sometimes she would laugh when the neighbor's cat leapt into the yard or when Daisy chased butterflies clumsily. Those laughs were small, careful, but they were real. The neighbors welcomed her back warmly, though I could see their guilt. They had not pressed harder, had not questioned more deeply. They brought over pies, flowers, casseroles. She accepted them politely, but I could tell she placed her trust only in the soil, in the dog, and in me. That was enough. Months slipped by, and the world moved on. Occasionally, someone in town would mention Ethan's disappearance, usually with a shake of the head. Ran out when things got tough, they would mutter. His mother sold off what little he had left, dismissing him as a coward who had never been worth much anyway. No one suspected the truth. No one asked questions I could not answer. And I never spoke of that night. I carried it silently, like a tool tucked away in a box, used once for a job that needed doing, and then put away forever. I did not feel pride. I did not feel shame. Only the steady weight of knowing I had done what was necessary. On warm evenings, I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, watching Lily in the garden. Her hair shone again in the sunlight, her cheeks carried color, her eyes sparkled with glimpses of the girl I remembered. Daisy lay stretched out beside her, content, protective as ever. Sometimes Lily would glance at me and smile, a small but certain smile that told me she knew she was safe. I thought often of my wife, gone so many years now. I thought of the promise I made her when Lily was just a baby, that I would protect our daughter no matter what. For a long time, I felt I had failed that promise. But looking at Lily now, alive, healing, smiling again, I knew I had kept it in the only way left to me. The world would never know the truth. They would never know where Ethan Brooks lay, buried in the woods by the frozen lake. They would never know how close Lily had come to death, how fragile the line had been between losing her forever and bringing her back. Justice, real justice, did not happen in courtrooms or newspapers. It happened here, in the quiet of my porch, in the laughter of my daughter, in the peace of knowing the threat was gone. I had raised my daughter, buried my wife, and ended the man who tried to destroy my family. In that order, and for me, that was enough. If you liked this story, subscribe and tell us your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next one, click on the box on the screen.